I work at the front desk at a 24-hour gym in Portland from 2019 to 2021. The pay wasn't great, but I was in college and needed something flexible that let me study during slow hours. My shift was 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., Thursday through Sunday. After midnight, the gym was pretty dead. Maybe 5 or 6 people total, usually the same regulars. By 3 a.m., it was often just me and whoever was working out. The overnight cleaning crew would come in at 2 a.m. to clean the locker rooms and mop the floors. The cleaning crew was always the same 2 guys, Miguel and his nephew, Danny. Miguel was probably in his 50s, spoke broken English, and kept to himself. Danny was early 20s, always had earbuds in, didn't talk much either. They'd show up, do their work, and leave by 4 a.m. I'd see him maybe twice during my shift, and we'd just nod at each other. This was in February of 2020, right before everything shut down. It was a Tuesday night, which wasn't one of my usual shifts, but I'd picked it up because another desk worker called out sick. Around 2:15 a.m., Miguel and Danny came in through the side entrance like always. Except something was off. Danny looked wrong. His face was pale and he was sweating, even though it was freezing outside. Miguel was basically holding him up, had his arm around Danny's shoulders. I asked if everything was okay. Miguel said Danny wasn't feeling good, but they needed to finish the shift. I offered to call someone, but Miguel said no, that Danny just needed to sit down for a minute. They went into the men's locker room and I went back to studying. About 20 minutes later, I heard a crash from the locker room, like metal hitting tile. I got up and walked over, called out asking if everyone was all right. Miguel came out and said Danny had knocked over a mop bucket, that he was really dizzy and needed to lie down. I told Miguel I should call an ambulance, but he got real insistent that I shouldn't. He said Danny just had the flu and needed rest, that an ambulance would cost too much money. I didn't know what to do. Danny was an adult, and if Miguel said not to call, I couldn't force it. Miguel asked if there was somewhere Danny could lie down for an hour until he felt better. The only private space we had was the manager's office in the back, so I unlocked it and Miguel helped Danny in there. Danny looked even worse now. His lips had a weird bluish tint. I asked Miguel again if we should get help, but he insisted Danny would be fine. Then Miguel went back to cleaning the locker rooms like nothing was wrong. I sat at the desk feeling uneasy but didn't know what else to do. Around 3 a.m., a member came up to check out. While I was processing him out, he asked if the gym had a weird smell. I hadn't noticed anything, but after he mentioned it, I realized there was this faint metallic smell in the air. The member left and I tried to go back to studying, but I couldn't concentrate. At 3:30, Miguel came out of the locker room with his cleaning cart. He said he was finished and was going to check on Danny. He went to the manager's office and closed the door. I could hear muffled talking, but couldn't make out words. About 5 minutes later, Miguel came out alone. He said Danny was sleeping and asked if I could lock up the office after my shift and let Danny out in the morning. I said no, that didn't make sense. If Danny was sick, he should go home or to a hospital. Miguel got this weird look on his face, not angry, more like scared. He said in this really quiet voice that Danny couldn't leave yet. Then he grabbed his cleaning cart and left through the side entrance. I sat there for a minute trying to process what just happened. Then I got up and walked to the manager's office. I knocked and called Danny's name. No response. I knocked louder. Nothing. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The office was dark and Danny was lying on the couch against the far wall. I turned on the light and walked over. His eyes were open, but he wasn't moving. I said his name and touched his shoulder. His skin was cold, like really cold. I shook him and his head just rolled to the side. That's when I saw the blood. There was blood soaked into the couch cushion under his head and more pooled on the floor. I ran back to the desk and called 911. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. I told the dispatcher there was someone injured at the gym and gave the address. She asked if the person was conscious, and I said no, I didn't think so. She asked if they were breathing. I said I didn't know, I didn't check. She told me to go back and check. I went back to the office and looked at Danny's chest. It wasn't moving. I told the dispatcher I didn't think he was breathing. She started giving me instructions for CPR, But when I got closer to Danny, I realized CPR wasn't going to help. There was a wound on the side of his head, above his ear. It looked like he'd been hit with something. The blood had stopped flowing, which I later learned meant his heart had stopped. The paramedics arrived maybe 6 minutes later. I let him in and showed him to the office. They checked Danny, and one of them looked at me and shook his head. They called it in, and then the police showed up. I gave my statement to 2 officers. I told them everything, about Miguel and Danny coming in, about Danny being sick, about Miguel leaving him in the office. They asked for Miguel's contact information, and I pulled it from our employee database. They tried calling Miguel, but the number went to a disconnected voicemail. They asked if I had an address, and I gave what was in the system. One of the officers left to check it out. The detective, who showed up about an hour later, asked me to go through everything again. He wanted to know exactly what Miguel had said, how Danny had looked, why I'd let Miguel leave Danny in the office. I explained that Miguel said Danny was just sick, and I didn't know he was injured. The detective said Danny had been dead for at least an hour before I found him, probably longer. He asked if I'd heard any fighting or arguments. I said no, nothing. The locker room where they'd been working was on the other side of the building, and I couldn't hear anything from the front desk. The gym got shut down for the rest of the day while they processed the scene. I had to stay for hours giving statements and answering questions. By the time they let me leave, it was almost noon. I found out later from news reports that Miguel never existed. The name and address in our system were fake. The social security number was someone else's. The gym's hiring process was so bad they'd never actually verified anything. The police think Miguel wasn't even his real name. They released a description and asked anyone with information to come forward, but as far as I know, they never found him. The working theory was that Miguel and Danny had gotten into some kind of fight, maybe over money, and Miguel had hit Danny with something. Then he brought Danny to the gym, pretending he was just sick, hoping to figure out what to do. Danny's real name was Daniel Ochoa. He was 23. He'd been working with Miguel about 6 months. His family said they barely knew Miguel, just that Danny had met him through a friend and Miguel had offered him cash work cleaning buildings at night. The autopsy showed Danny died from blunt force trauma to the head. They found fibers in the wound that matched a pipe wrench. Miguel's cleaning card had a pipe wrench in it. I'd walked right past it multiple times that night and never noticed. I quit the gym 2 weeks later. I couldn't go back there. Every time I walked past that office, I'd see Danny lying on that couch with his eyes open. I'd think about how he was probably already dead when Miguel brought him in, and I just let it happen. The gym tried to get me to stay. They said it wasn't my fault and offered to move me to day shifts, but I couldn't do it. I ended up getting a job at a coffee shop instead. I still think about that night sometimes, about the weird smell that member mentioned, which was probably blood, about how pale Danny looked when they came in, about Miguel's face when he asked me to lock Danny in the office, and I think about the fact that Miguel is still out there somewhere. The police never found him. He probably got a new fake identity and is working somewhere else now, cleaning buildings at night where no one asks questions.
I've been going to the same Planet Fitness in Tampa for about 3 years. It's a pretty standard gym, nothing fancy, but it's cheap and open 24 hours, which works for my schedule. I work nights as a nurse, so I usually go to the gym around 2 or 3 a.m. when I get off shift. At that hour, there's usually only 5 or 6 other people there. You start to recognize the regulars. There's an older guy who does the elliptical for exactly 30 minutes every night, a younger woman who lifts weights in the corner, a couple of college-age kids who come in together. About 4 months ago, I started noticing someone new, a girl, probably early 20s with dark hair and a ponytail. She was always on the same treadmill, third one from the left in the cardio area. Every single time I came in, she was there, running. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe she had a similar schedule to mine. But after a few weeks, I realized I'd never seen her arrive or leave. She was just always there when I got there, and still there when I left an hour later. One night, I decided to pay closer attention. I got to the gym at 2:45 a.m., and she was already on the treadmill, running at what looked like a pretty fast pace. I did my usual routine and kept glancing over at her. She never slowed down, never stopped to drink water, never even adjusted her ponytail, just kept running. I finished my workout around 3:45, and she was still going. I thought about saying something, asking if she was training for a marathon or something, but she had earbuds in and seemed really focused. The next night, same thing. She was there when I arrived, running on the same treadmill. I started timing her in my head. From 2:45 when I got there until 3:45 when I left, she ran non-stop. That's at least an hour, probably more. No breaks, no water, no change in pace. I asked the overnight desk worker about her. He was this kid, probably 19 or 20, and he looked at me kind of funny when I described her. He said he'd seen her too, but didn't know anything about her. Said she must be really dedicated. This went on for another few weeks. Every night I came in, she was there. Always the same treadmill, always running. I started getting to the gym at different times to see if I could catch her arriving or leaving, but it didn't matter if I came at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. She was always there, always running. Then one night, I came in around 3 a.m. and she wasn't there. The treadmill was empty. I actually felt relieved. I'd started getting really creeped out by her constant presence. I got on a treadmill, a few machines down from her usual one, and started my warm-up. About 10 minutes in, I heard a treadmill start up. I looked over, and she was there, on her usual treadmill, running, like she'd been there the whole time. But I'd checked when I came in. That treadmill was empty. I'd been watching the cardio area, and I hadn't seen anyone walk over there. She just appeared. I stopped my treadmill and walked over to her. I called out to get her attention, but she didn't respond. I got closer and said, "Excuse me," louder. Nothing. She just kept running, staring straight ahead. I reached out to tap her shoulder, and my hand went cold, like the air around her was freezing. I pulled my hand back, and she turned her head to look at me. Her face was normal. She looked like a regular person, but her eyes were wrong. They weren't moving. When she turned her head, her eyes stayed fixed in the same position, like she was a doll. I backed away, and she turned back to face forward, kept running like nothing happened. I grabbed my stuff and went to the front desk. I told the worker that something was wrong with the girl on the treadmill, that she wouldn't respond and looked sick. He came back to the cardio area with me. The treadmill was empty. He asked which one, and I pointed. He said there was nobody there. I insisted she'd been there 30 seconds ago. He pulled up the security footage on his phone, the app they use to monitor the gym. He showed me the live feed of the cardio area. All the treadmills were empty, except mine, which was still running from when I jumped off. I looked at the actual treadmill, and it was running. I could see it moving. But on the camera feed, it was off and empty. The desk worker said the cameras must be glitching, and he'd report it. I left right then. Didn't finish my workout, just changed and got out. I sat in my car for a few minutes trying to calm down. I pulled up the gym's app on my phone to check something. The app shows you gym traffic, how many people are checked in at any time. It said there were 4 people in the gym, me, the desk worker, and 2 other members. But I'd seen at least 5 people inside, including the girl on the treadmill. I didn't go back to that gym for a week. When I finally did, I made sure to go during the day on my day off. The gym was crowded and everything seemed normal. I asked a different desk worker about the overnight crew and if they'd noticed anything weird with the treadmills or the cameras. She said actually yes, they'd been having issues with one specific treadmill, the third one from the left. It kept turning on by itself in the middle of the night. Maintenance had looked at it twice and couldn't find anything wrong, but it kept happening. I asked if anyone had ever been hurt on that treadmill. She said not that she knew of, but the gym had only been open for 2 years, and she'd only worked there for 6 months. I did some research on my own. I looked up the address and found that before it was a Planet Fitness, the building was a different gym. Before that, it was a commercial space that sat empty for a few years. I couldn't find any news articles about deaths or accidents at either gym, but I did find something interesting. On a local Reddit thread about the area, Someone had posted about a hit and run that happened in the parking lot of that plaza about 5 years ago. A college student was killed. The driver was never caught. The post didn't have a name, but it mentioned the victim was a young woman who'd been out jogging early in the morning. That was all the detail given. I don't know if that has anything to do with what I saw. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe I was just tired and seeing things. But I've been going to that gym for 3 years, and I've never hallucinated before. I still go there, but I don't go overnight anymore. I switched to evening workouts around 9 or 10 p.m., and I never use the treadmills. I stick to the weights and the bikes. Sometimes when I'm there in the evening, I'll glance at the cardio area, and that third treadmill is running with nobody on it, the belt just moving like someone invisible is using it. The staff doesn't seem to notice or care, but I notice, and I stay far away. Because I remember how cold the air felt around that girl, how her eyes didn't move, how she appeared on a treadmill that I'd seen empty just minutes before. And I remember that on the security footage, she wasn't there at all. Like she'd never been there. Like maybe she's been running on that treadmill for 5 years, and nobody can see her except for the people who are there at the exact right time. The people who are paying attention.
This happened at the gym I went to in Boston back in 2018. It was a pretty nice place in the South End. 3 floors, full locker rooms with saunas and steam rooms. I'd been a member for about a year. I usually went after work around 6 p.m. when it was crowded, but one day I had a dentist appointment in the morning and decided to go to the gym around 10 a.m. instead. I'd never been that early before and was surprised how empty it was. The locker room was completely dead. I changed and did my workout, then went back to shower. The men's locker room had regular showers and then a separate wet area with a sauna, steam room, and hot tub. I'd used the sauna a few times, but never really bothered with the steam room. That day, I decided to try it. I finished my shower, wrapped a towel around myself, and walked into the steam room. The steam was thick, and I could barely see 2 feet in front of me. I sat down on one of the tiled benches and closed my eyes. I was in there maybe 3 minutes when I heard the door open. Someone else came in. I couldn't see them through the steam, but I heard them sit down on the opposite side of the room. Normal enough. I kept my eyes closed and tried to relax. A few minutes passed, and then I heard them move. It sounded like they shifted position on the bench. Then I heard it again, and again. They kept moving around like they couldn't get comfortable. It was kind of annoying, but I tried to ignore it. Then they spoke. It was a man's voice, older, and he said, "Excuse me." I opened my eyes, but couldn't see him through the steam. I said, "Yeah," and he asked how long the steam room stays on. I told him I wasn't sure and that I didn't work there. He said, "Okay," and went quiet. Another minute passed, and he spoke again. The same question. "How long does the steam room stay on?" I thought maybe he hadn't heard my answer, so I said louder that I didn't know. He went quiet again. This happened 3 more times over the next few minutes. He'd ask the exact same question in the exact same tone. I'd answer, and he'd go quiet. By the 5th time, I was getting freaked out. Something was wrong with this guy. I decided to leave. I stood up and started walking toward where I thought the door was. The steam was so thick I had to feel along the wall to find it. As I was searching for the door, I heard the man move. He stood up. Then I heard his footsteps on the tile. He was walking toward me. I called out that I was trying to leave and to give me a second to find the door. He didn't respond. The footsteps kept coming. I found the handle and pulled it open. The rush of cooler air from outside cleared some of the steam, and I looked back. There was a man standing about 5 feet from me. He was completely naked, no towel, and he was just staring at me with this blank expression. What freaked me out most was his eyes. They weren't focused on me. They were looking through me, like he couldn't actually see me but knew I was there. I got out of there fast and went straight to the front desk. I told the guy working that there was someone acting really weird in the steam room. He asked what the person looked like, and I described him. The desk guy's face changed. He asked me to describe him again, which I did. Then he said he'd go check it out and asked me to wait.
He came back about 5 minutes later and said the steam room was empty. I told him that was impossible, that the guy had been right there. The desk worker said he checked everywhere in the wet area and there was no one matching that description. I went back to the locker room and got dressed. As I was leaving, the desk worker stopped me and asked if I had a minute to talk. He took me to a side office and closed the door. He said this wasn't the first time someone had reported seeing a man in the steam room who then disappeared. Over the past 6 months, 3 other members had described almost the exact same experience. A man asking questions repeatedly, standing too close, staring blankly, and every time staff checked, no one was there. He asked if I had reported it to the manager, and I said no, I was telling him. He got quiet for a second, then said he probably shouldn't tell me this, but he thought I deserved to know. 2 years ago, a member died in that steam room. He'd had a heart attack and wasn't found until the next morning when staff came to open. The steam room had been running all night with his body inside. The member who died had dementia. His family said he'd been getting more confused in the months before his death, asking the same questions over and over, sometimes not recognizing where he was. They think he went into the steam room late at night when the gym was empty and got disoriented, then had the heart attack. The desk workers said ever since then, members had occasionally reported seeing someone matching the dead man's description in the steam room, always alone, always asking repetitive questions, and every time staff checked, no one was there. I stopped going to that gym after that conversation. I didn't cancel my membership right away because I was on a year contract, but I never went back. I couldn't. Every time I thought about going, I'd remember that man's blank stare through the steam. About 6 months ago, the gym sent out an email saying they were doing renovations and the steam room would be closed permanently. They claimed it was due to maintenance issues, but I talked to the desk worker later and he said they'd had so many complaints about experiences in there that management decided it was easier to just shut it down. I drove past that gym a few months ago. It's under new ownership now, with a different name. I looked up their amenities online and they have a sauna and hot tub, but no steam room. The space where it used to be is now a yoga studio. I wonder if anyone who uses that yoga studio knows what it used to be there, if they've ever felt like someone was in the room when they were alone, if they've ever heard a voice asking a question that doesn't make sense. I hope they closed it up properly. I hope that man found peace or moved on or whatever happens. But part of me thinks he's probably still there, still confused, still asking the same question to anyone who'll listen, still waiting for an answer that never comes.